Good morning.
Good morning,
Sister
Peg.
Joann Plumpe, formerly known as Sister Rose Joseph.
Correct?
How did you get the name Rose Joseph?
Oh, that's a long story. My parents' names were Walter and Lucille.
Okay.
Now, I wasn't too excited about going through life.
Walter Lucille.
Walter Lucille, Sister Walter Lucille, or Lucille Walter. And I had, at that time, a devotion to St. Joseph, so I picked Joseph, and then I picked a short feminine name that would go before it.
So apropos today on March 19th, the
This
Feast
is
of
true.
St. Joseph,
This is
that
true.
you are going to expound on
Feast of St. Joseph.
right. You're going to expound on your life story
Right.
with us and share that.
Expound, I don't know, but
But
I'll
anyway.
certainly share.
Well, thank you for coming all the way from Bay City to be with
You're
us
welcome.
and share your 30 minutes of your lifetime looking at the highlights. We're most grateful. So let's start where your journey started. Where were you born? Where did you grow up in schools and
Sure.
family?
I grew up on the east side of Detroit. My parents originally grew up in a farming community in north central Ohio. It was known as Putnam County.
Okay.
And most of my aunts and uncles lived in that area. My mother's maiden name was Lucille Lammers, and my father was Walter Plumpe. I was the oldest of three.
Okay.
I have a brother who is a year and a half younger than I, and a second brother who's 10 years younger than
Oh
I.
my. Mhm.
Right. So in reality, in the beginning, at least for the first 10 years, we were a family of four,
Mhm.
and then William Charles came along.
Okay.
Detroit at that time was a great place to grow up
Mhm.
on the east side.
On the east side. Mhm.
I had, if I think about what the different experiences and values of my family, we were certainly Catholic, but not extremely pietistic. You know, there weren't lots of statues or
Okay.
things like that. Education was extremely important. It was just assumed that I'd go to college.
So that was a value of your parents.
Very much so.
Interesting,
Very
okay.
much so. And and I think in extended family too. If I look at cousins, you know, my generation, we all are highly educated, or pretty well so. So education was certainly a value. Another experience when I look back, we had my mother's parents, which were Joseph and Ann Lammers, lived on a farm, a working farm still. So once a month, we would spend a weekend in north central Ohio, and I got to milk cows
Oh my, how exciting.
and watch piglings be born and collect eggs and so forth. So that was quite an experience, and I think it broadened my perspective. The other value, I guess you'd call it, is my parents loved to travel. And Dad would, you know, my father was a tool and die maker.
Okay.
And during his summer vacations, we load in the car and head for some destination.
You didn't know where?
Oh no, it would have been planned, but one year we went to Phoenix, Arizona, another year to the Yellowstone.
Nice, okay.
My mother loved the Smoky Mountains, so we went there often, Niagara, Washington, D.C. And it got to the extent that by the time I graduated from high school, I had been in all 48 states,
You are
continental states.
Uh-huh.
I know.
Oh my.
I know. Now, some of them we just scooted
Right.
through, but I still counted it.
Yeah.
So,
How exciting.
yeah, it was.
And you went to high school at Dominican?
Right, correct. Our high school, and I was taught by the Adrian Dominicans.
Where did you go to grade school?
St. Matthew's.
Okay, so that was not the Adrians.
And, you know, at the IHMs. And I found the Dominicans, first of all, excellent educators.
Yeah.
And it makes sense that I really would appreciate that. And I never thought of becoming a nun.
Mm-hmm.
It never entered my...
Grade school, high school?
Never, no. And then in the... during Christmas break, a close friend of mine wanted to enter another community, and her parents wouldn't allow it. So she'd call me up, and, you know, I'd basically listen to her lamenting. And in one of these conversations, she said to me, "Joann, have you ever considered religious life?" And I said, "Oh, no."
Mm-hmm.
You know, no.
Mm-hmm.
And then I couldn't get to sleep for like 2 or 3 nights. And finally, one night, I must have awakened in bed, and I sat up, and I must have loudly said, "Okay, I'll try it," to the point that my mother came in my bedroom and asked me what was wrong. And I just said, "Oh, I had a nightmare," you know, and then that was it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I never told my parents I wanted to enter, and by finally...
Did you tell your girlfriend or the girl?
I told no one.
Okay.
Well, I did contact one of the Adrians, Sister Rita Schaefer, who was Alberta's, she was my chemistry teacher, and again, I was science and math were my fields. So finally, on the Feast of St. Joseph, I told my parents, and they were just flabbergasted. Mm-hmm. And I think they really thought I wasn't serious, and naturally that just made my resolve more definite. And I entered that June.
Right after high school.
Right after high school. Mm-hmm.
But there usually were a lot of girls from Dominican that entered.
Right,
okay.
Right. I think there were about 11
at the time
from a class of approximately 300 girls.
Oh my gosh.
I know.
300 graduated from Dominican.
And that was, you know, I had other individuals that knew a little bit about my history. It wasn't like I was going in. Our group was large. I believe it was the largest group that ever entered. And I at least had some people, they weren't all strangers to me.
Right.
The novitiate was interesting.
How was it for your family, the two brothers?
We had as far as the entering, they were, like I said, they didn't think I would stay. In fact, later I found out that my aunt and uncle came to visit like a month after I had entered, and my mother was taking him up to the room and showing, or maybe it was before I left, but I wasn't home, showing everything that they had to bring in. Mom said to her brother, "You know, we have to spend all this money and all this clothes, and she's going to be in the convent for a month, and she'll come home. Why can't we just send a donation?" You know, so they really
Kind of made sense.
did not imagine that I'd ever pictured me in that. However, they both had brothers who were priests. And so I remember as a small girl, both of those priests, or at different times, would come, and I saw them as normal people. You know, they'd play cards, have a drink, so I'm sure that also influenced me. When I was a novice, my parents came and got to have a special visit with me, which was highly unusual.
Exactly.
And they told me that my mother had been diagnosed with lymphoma. She was 46 at the time.
Oh my.
My youngest brother was in 2nd grade. So that changed our family radically. And 5 years later, it was 3 months before I was to make finals, she died.
Oh.
And Then 6 years later, my dad died.
Oh, my word.
So my 20s were just like a blur, plus all the changes were taking
And with
place.
your younger brother, or both your brothers, but the one that was...
Right.
Yeah.
My father, during those 6 years, had remarried.
Okay.
So, you know, the situation, but still, it was very, very hard. And I look back on my 20s now, and they were just blurry, you know, very blurry.
What got you through?
Very much the women I lived with,
Okay.
and also the ministry.
And what was...
Well, I started in, I don't know exactly the exact years, but I began teaching mathematics in high school at Rosary. I started
Okay.
at, which was
Okay.
our own school.
Yeah.
And I remember I had to stay like a day ahead of the students. I figured I'd be teaching freshman mathematics because I had been teaching grade school. But the principal at the time said, oh, you know, no one has any background in mathematics. So I got these juniors and seniors in trigonometry and probability and, you know. But
It's amazing how we got through
I know.
with what we were asked to do, and we did. We did it.
Exactly.
Faith, trust.
Exactly. And some of those students still keep in contact with me.
Wonderful. Maybe they're the ones that want to hear your story.
I have no idea. I spent 2 years at Rosary,
Okay.
and then I went to Aquinas High School in Southgate, Michigan, and was there, I believe, for 6 years. And by that time, I had taught math. You know, I had some experience, so that was a lot better. And then I loved it. I just absolutely. In fact, I remember one year I talked the principal, who happened to be a math major, to closing all the classes and having a math day. And we did, you know, and the whole idea of helping the students realize that math can be, it doesn't have to be arduous, it can be fun. And in fact, one of those students, 3 years, I'm presently ministering in a parish, and one day after Mass, this middle-aged gentleman came to me. This is in Bay City.
Right.
And he said, Sister Joann? And I said, yes. And then he gave me his name. It was a student I had taught in Southgate, Michigan.
Wow.
And he is presently a parishioner of this parish. And that following summer, we baptized his granddaughter.
Oh, my. Oh,
I
my.
know.
But he knew you as Joann, or did he call you by your...
No, he knew me as Joann.
Oh, okay.
By the time it was the grade school,
Okay.
when I was teaching grade school, that I was Rose Joseph. But that, in another story, I taught as Rose Joseph in a grade school in Southgate. Then I moved to Pawpaw and taught in Pawpaw at grade school for 3 years. And it was during that time that we went back to our regular names. We were given the choice of wearing regular clothes. Then I went to Rosary. Then I went to Aquinas. Well, some of the children that I taught in first grade in Southgate were now in high school.
Oh, wow.
But they knew me as Sister Rose Joseph with full habit. So I meet some of these kids in the hall, and they'd stare at me.
Yeah.
You know, like, I've seen that woman someplace before, but where? You know? And also, I remember one instance, I still remember the student's name. I was teaching, I think it was algebra, second year algebra, and these were math majors, and I was going on a quiet tyrant. You know, you've got to learn this material if you're going to go into math or science. I said, you've been spoon-fed this math too long. I must have said that about 3 or 4 times. This boy raises his hand, and I said, "Yes, Thomas." And he says, "It all started in first grade, didn't it, sister?"
Oh, cute, cute.
Which, brought the whole house down.
That's cute. That's cute. Well, besides your teaching, you also were involved in campus ministry as
Correct.
part of your ministerial
I
experiences.
went from high school mathematics. The congregation allowed me to study for 2 years, and I attended Fordham University in theology. And from there, I went to campus ministry in Utah, at Utah State.
Utah, you saw that advertised someplace and thought,
I was called up. I'm trying to figure out, I have no
Okay.
idea how but the pastor called me up and said, would I be willing to come out for an interview? And I did, and I loved it, absolutely loved it. I remember they were saying they were going to have a festival, and my idea of a festival was, Ferris wheels and all that. Well, their festival was, they had little fish tank that, with plastic fish that the kids could, and it was, they were under terrific influence to convert to Mormonism. And to the point where, this was 35 years ago. And I think that really forged the small community because they supported one another. And they knew that I had come out there, and I literally was the first Dominican sister to minister in the state of Utah. And they knew I was isolated, and so they had me, they wanted me very much to be part of the community. So the first 2 weeks I was there, I remember going on a bike ride for 9 miles, hiking, and hiking in Utah is not like walk straight up. Going on 2 hikes, they were marvelous views, and tubing down a canal. And I can picture myself sitting in the tub saying, if this is what it takes to be a campus minister, I don't think I'm going to make it.
oh God, that's cute.
So from there, I went to Miami of Ohio and was director of campus ministry there for 8 years.
Wow.
And, I also, that was the time period or the position that I was allowed to preach. So at Sunday Masses. So
Wow.
for once a month, and that's, you appreciate the work that goes in, that one has to do to give a homily that really touches people or makes sense to them. After Miami, I studied for a year with Scripture from Catholic Theological Union in Chicago, and part of that was spending 3 months studying Scripture in Israel, which was a marvelous opportunity. After
Were you there by yourself?
Oh, no, it was, you went over
class,
with a group,
right.
and the professors went with you. So you'd go to a site, and they would, you could read the verses of Scripture and then get the background.
Got it.
It was excellent, just excellent. From there, the prioress at the time, Pat Walter, approached me to consider going into formation work, and I then for the next 5 years I was pre-admissions director. I was also the liaison with the temporary profess, and I worked with the second-year novices after they had discerned that they were going to make first profession, and we're looking in what are the possibilities for ministry and for community. After 5 years, I applied for a sabbatical. On this sabbatical, I spent 3 months in Santa Fe, outside of Santa Fe at Sangre de Cristo.
Right.
Marvelous. Met great people, and just had a time to relax. And I also, in March, for a month, I lived with the Dominican Sisters in New Zealand, and loved that.
That was part of your sabbatical?
That was part of my sabbatical. And I returned.
What was special about that? And New Zealand?
Oh, New Zealand, yeah. Well, exactly. Even today, you know, like when they talk about what's happened, the tragedy at Christchurch, well, I could say I've been there and I know.
Okay.
What? And again, it was the people, the nuns I lived with just went out of their way to help me understand, and I would recommend going to New Zealand to anyone.
I don't think people want to go there.
I know, but it was. After that, I began looking into what ministry I should at that time.
Before we get into that new ministry, as you look back at your, the high schools and the grade schools and the university, the campus ministry, as you look back on those ministries, can you recall, was there one that had the most, I guess we can't say the most because every experience we have touches.
Most what?
Every experience we have touches us in a different way. But was there one experience in all your teaching that was the most impressionistic on you and who you are? Or
that would be very difficult. It was different times of my life.
Yeah.
Probably going out to Utah at that time.
Yeah.
And the way that community engulfed me right away in their arms, and
because there was no other sister out there,
right?
Adrian Dominican,
exactly.
Or sisters. Were there?
There were sisters, but I'm trying to think, but there really weren't any that I knew beforehand. You know, I got to know the sisters, but there wasn't any sisters in Logan at the time, so. That probably would have been thing.
Wow, right out to the desert, huh?
Yeah.
Kind of.
After my sabbatical, I thought, what am I going to do? You know, and I was in my late 50s at the time, and I thought, is campus ministry? Am I a little bit too, all the night meetings? And so I interviewed at some campus ministry, and then I thought, well, if I go into parish work, I'd like to, how about being like in charge of a parish, one of a priestless parish, where there's no resident priest. And Jennifer Genzi, who I had gone to high school, graduated with high school with, was in charge of these parish coordinators, which in Saginaw at that time were called pastoral administrators. Right. And so I contacted her, and to make a long story short, I ended up interviewing. Actually, I interviewed at a university, Central Michigan, and I also interviewed at this small parish. I believe you.
That's right, Bay City.
You came for my installation, and the first couple months I had the position, it was a whirlwind, because you think but how the mass goes and that type.
And that was the first time, though, that they had a lay administrator, or they had
right.
A
The
priestless.
parish did.
The parish was priestless.
The diocese itself had a long history,
Yeah.
and that was one of the things I considered, because I thought, I don't think I'd be too good at being the first, and none of the whole diocese, where you run into a lot of blocks, I felt. Whereas this, there was enough, and I was I must have been somewhat, famous isn't the word, but the word got out, let's put it that way. And Bay City is a small town. Small town, it's a city, but it's really a small town, and everybody knows everybody else, and everybody's related. I always say, well, I started, I was a runner, and so I'd run the 3 miles, and on one of my trips, this lady comes up to me, and she had a cute little dog, and I started a conversation with her about this dog, and we talked a little bit, and then she asked who I was, or where I lived, and I told her, and she said, well, that's kind of where St. Hedwig said. And I thought, oh God. So, and then she said, when I finally told her I'm Sister Joann, I'm the pastor, oh, she said, can I tell people I met you?
Running?
I'm standing here with my shorts and my, So,
well, I remember that because they were used to the priest being there. And this was the first time that there was going to be a sister, which is okay. But I was thinking, that is really a risky and a challenge that you took at that time. Because people were going on about, oh, we love Father so-and-so, and we love Father, and Father was this, Father that. I thought, oh God, more power to her. Talk about taking a risk. But it was soon. You're at the same place still.
Well, I was there for 13 years, and then they merged the parishes.
Right, that's what I figured when I saw a different name.
I remember it was about a month into my ministry, and I got a call from my sacramental minister like 45 minutes before Mass was to start. And he said, Joann, I'm really throwing up. I'm not feeling well. I can't come and say Mass. So I had to go and stand in front of those people who are all in the pews thinking that a Mass was going to take place. And I remember saying to them, this morning, Father Kevin called me to let me know that he wouldn't be able to come. And on this short notice, we won't be having a celebration of the Mass. And I said, however, I will be conducting a Sunday celebration in the absence of a priest. And I remember holding up the book saying, this is okay, this is, And I looked out, and it was like I had just announced that the atom bomb was going to drop.
Did they leave?
Then after the ceremony, or celebration, one of the women in the parish came up to me and said, Sister, I'm an 8 o'clocker. That meant, the 8 o'clock Mass had been eliminated.
Okay.
So she said, can you do your thing at 8 o'clock?
Interesting. So it was well received.
Pardon me?
It was well received.
I think so, yes. It was lucky because that was the weekend I was supposed to preach. So I had a good homily, or reasonable homily prepared, and I kind of knew the procedure.
So as a parish administrator, is that what you call yourself?
Right.
Okay.
PA.
What is it that you do? Everything except with the priest, everything except say Mass.
Right. During those 13 years as parish administrator, I led the parish council. I was responsible for the staff. I would preach. I'd meet with the families at times of funerals. I did all the marriage prep. I instructed the couples when they were looking to have their child baptized. I encouraged. I was basically a pastor. Without the obviously, I didn't perform any of the sacramental.
So you also had to recently merge these parishes. Well, you said you had, So you
right. The parishes. 5 years ago, the parish St. Hedwig's merged with a larger parish, which was very difficult.
Yeah, that usually
You
is.
know, there was grieving because this small community of about 450 had been together and had, you know, just formed a healthy community, prayerful, and to have that dissolved was very hard. But at that time, the bishop was very good. He met with me individually and asked if I was interested in taking another parish. In other words, continuing as PA, but in a different area. And at the time, I thought, no, you know, at my age and all. But I did tell him that I'd be more than willing. In fact, I wanted to continue ministry in the Diocese of Saginaw, which the priest who knew he was going to be assigned to the new parish, the newly merged of the two, asked if I'd be willing to work as a pastoral minister, associate.
Okay.
And that's how I ended at Corpus Christi, which is the name of the two merged parishes. And it was good. It was really good for the people because...
Familiar.
Right, the familiar face.
Yeah.
The secretary came over too, which was excellent. And Father Kevin is an assistant there, so...
So you really were a pioneer in some of this.
I guess
and
call
look at
that,
what your other experience in Utah. I'm very taken up with the fact that you went there and how significant that was. Is there anything else you'd like to share with us that I didn't ask?
I think you covered quite a bit.
Well, as I said earlier, I've been very impressed. You seem to be able to keep some balance as much as you can in a big parish because you do take some time away.
I do.
And you come here at various times to kind of an R&R. It's not that long, but at least you know, the drive here is...
I really think that's so important. Like, even this year, after Christmas and all the holidays, it was... I was exhausted. Yeah. And so, luckily, I had a chance to go out to Nevada and stay with our sisters there.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
In Las Vegas.
Right.
I mean Henderson.
Henderson, yeah. Actually, I spent a week at the hospitality house and used it as a really retreat time, you know. But I tell the parishioners, oh, yes, I'm going to go for some retreat time in Las Vegas. And they'd say, oh, sure, sister.
Yeah. Well, you've had a wonderful life, and you've given a lot, and you've had various experiences.
I've been very blessed.
How blessed you are, and how blessed we are, too, as some of us have been part of all that. So, Joann Plumpe, sister, formerly Sister Rose Joseph, thank you so much for coming down here on this special trip.
It's been a great privilege.
Yeah, God bless you. As you continue in your ministry, and be sure you take time. You know?
Oh, I do.
Yeah, that's so important. Safe travels back.
Thank you.